Shut your bottle.
So
I was just making a comment before how surprised I was on how quickly this abortion ban just swept across the South.
the evil, horrible abortion ban.
Are you saying other states are doing it?
Yeah, I mean Missouri. I mean, there's talk of other states picking right up after.
Don't tell Alyssa Milano.
Oh, I know.
Alyssa Milano has a problem with.
Oh, huge problem.
Really?
She called for a celebrity boycott of Georgia or of Alabama. Well, Georgia's talking about it too, right? Because they do a lot of Hollywood does a lot of filming in Georgia, but yeah, and then she called for a sex strike. No sex until
That's right.
you're allowed to kill your baby.
Yeah.
A sex strike in Georgia?
Or Alabama. Or maybe in general. I don't really pay close attention to her. But
wonder why she's picking up that baton and running ahead of everybody else with it.
I don't. I would love to have somebody on the the pro-choice side of things explain to me exactly their thinking, because I don't get it.
So can we just unpack what exactly the ban is?
Please.
So I think in Alabama, it's a person can't have an abortion after 6 weeks.
This is called the heartbeat abortion bill,
Heartbeat
right?
abortion ban.
Okay.
And it's not to prosecute the person having the abortion, but it's to go after the people that give abortions. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it has to do with pursuing the people that do this as a business.
So the bill says that if you can detect a fetal heartbeat, you cannot
Right.
abort, right?
Yes.
Except in
I think so,
cases
yeah.
of medical emergency.
Everything you need to know about the ban.
Yeah.
Washington Post, that's a great
Oh yeah.
page
Yeah,
that would really give you
surprisingly, a
an
lot of good stuff comes out of Washington Post.
update.
Yeah, I mean, that seems reasonable to me. If there's a heartbeat.
It does to me too, but there's where the argument twists, of course, because the argument at one point became, where does life start, right?
Right.
Where does this clump of cells, which they call it, become a viable life?
You know where I think my wife's going to mind this, but there are a number of people, including folks known as religious, as Christians, that are against the bill themselves because they think it's too extreme. I had this conversation with my wife, and she's not going to mind, but I think where she was taken aback, she thought it was too extreme for the rape and incest point for underage. Like she said, for let's say a kid was raped by their dad and they were 15 years old, that this also includes them. So there was a line that was interesting from her point of view where she's like, wow, that's too extreme. And I wonder how many Catholics, what their point of view is. I know when you get to those lines, it does seem uncomfortable. But really, when you get down to it, a life is a life. It doesn't really necessarily matter where it comes from. And I guess it's easy as a guy for me to say that because I'm not a woman that can be pregnant. But it does, that's where people drive to those lines to prevent these laws from happening in the first place. They'll be like, well, what of the life of the mother? What about the rape? And what if they're raped when they were 10 years old and they were impregnated? Should you make them have the baby?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know the answer to that.
No.
My inclination is to say what you just said, that a life is a life.
Right.
Unintended or not, regardless of circumstance, it doesn't remove the inherent human value from that life.
Right.
But, the mitigating factors involved in the lives of other people, that's where things get complicated, and I don't know answers, really.
Yeah, and I was surprised, when I brought it up, I'm like, what do you think of the ban? I'm like, wow, I was totally surprised. And I'm usually kept up on these. And she's like, yeah, it's too extreme. I'm like, what are you talking about? It surprised me that but then she started going into it, and then you get into that difficult discussion about the child and things like that. And it's funny how Christians and Catholics, they draw their own internal lines on things just out of feeling.
Yeah.
And that we're going to be getting into a subject later on today about people that entered into Christianity and ultimately Catholicism, and what their point of view was and how they made it through to where they are now. People having doubt. But I guess the question is, if you really do believe and you follow guidance from the Bible and from the Catechism, is it okay to be 90% on board, or do you have to be 100, right? I mean, if you're really going to go in, and that's the problem. People look at these fringe things and they get really uncomfortable with the outcomes, but in the end, you have to look at yourself and say, well, okay, you committed yourself to this faith. You really believe it's the right way.
Well, yeah.
How can you make a self-decision and say, well, I'm only going to agree with 90% of it. This other 10%, I'm going to think otherwise.
Right. I don't. I mean, I am 100% on board with believing that a baby at whatever stage of development is a human life, and it's wrong to take it away.
Right.
The issue comes in, I think, where you're telling other people what they have to believe.
Exactly.
At what point, does your responsibility to save this life, come up against you pushing your beliefs on someone else?
Very, very good point.
I don't know.
And could you imagine, the how the person would feel with that constant reminder of what happened to them at that one time? If you're talking, the case of incest or in
Sure.
rape, they would constantly be reminded, and that humiliation through the whole 9 months of carrying that baby, and so I get that. That's definitely. I mean, you would have to have an amazing amount of faith to not just say, let's get rid of this.
Sure. I was thinking about that the other day, though, that the arguments against being pro-life, right? So the arguments for being pro-choice, by and large, rely on emotional factors like that. It's not the most existential of arguments, right? Whereas I think the pro-life side of things is a much more existential argument. And we teach kids that you can always make good out of a bad situation, but it seems like in that case it's so jarring that we're ready to just chuck that and say, this was awful, this happened to you, you can't live with the memory of this forever, but how about helping that person along and helping them to actually see that some good can come out of an absolutely horrible thing, and that good can be a child who through no fault of its own was conceived, and giving that child a brilliant life.
I mean, an example of that, I experience that example every day. I was adopted, so my birth mother was 15 years old when she had me, and so the interesting part behind that, my wife has been good enough to try to pursue my family background to see, genetically where I line up. And her interest was more in making sure health-wise I'm going to be okay genetically, and trying to find out the medical information. It was amazing what she found, and there's good people out there that try to help people like me to figure it out. But if you look at my situation, I'm blessed to have what I have and to live a rich life. And she could have easily, chose to abort me. And this whole generational, there'd be a complete gap and void of me and my kids and nothing being in place if she aborted me. And how many people would be much more successful than I was, or are missing because somebody made the choice to abort them.
Yeah.
And my birth mother doesn't want to have anything to do with me, and that's okay. I think she still feels the hurt about what happened and maybe the decision she had, but I'm very thankful for what she did for me. But how many more people haven't had the opportunity I had out of a simple person's choice to say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this anymore, so let's just cut it out. Right?
Yeah.
in the show that I watched, Convinced, there was a lady that was on there, and she was a former atheist, and she talked about her walk slowly. She was very intelligent, but her slow walk into finding truth in Christianity, and ultimately, not only she went to I didn't even know there was such a thing, but a pro-choice church, and she actually, what is it called? She was employed at Planned Parenthood, and she went into detail of what her job was, and so
Is this Abby Johnson?
I don't know, was that her name?
I don't remember.
I don't remember. I don't think she's not.
Oh, she's not a speaker now.
Yeah,
like
I
a pro-life
don't
speaker.
believe so.
Okay.
But what fascinated me with her was she was responsible for performing a sonogram while the abortion was occurring. So I didn't even understand how this worked, but the sonogram gives a clear picture of the baby and where the baby's located in the womb. And you can also hear the heartbeat and everything. So her job was to hold the wand or what have you onto the belly of the mother and help track where the baby was located, so the man or the abortion doctor, whomever it was performing it, would be able to get clear sight on where the baby was, so he could clean it out, right? And so she slowly, after experiencing that, realized how wrong it was, and she became very much a pro-life player.
So she was watching the abortion happen live.
Yes, and
on Sonogram.
She said, she was employed, she was making good money there, and she justified it even for a good while, where she was going to church and was okay with it. And what's the Lee or Mike will be able to rattle off the line, but what's the line where if you see your right hand committing,
if your right hand commits a sin, cut it off, because it's far better to enter heaven with
right,
without that than
right,
than to go to hell with it.
Which goes diametrically opposed to what Archie Bunker said about being an organ donor and things like that.
But
when you get up to heaven, Edith, they're going to ask you where all the parts are.
Yeah, right. But she said they had that reading in church. She read it and spent time with it, and it just so happened that in church, her hand, when she came in, was in a lot of pain. And the reason it was in pain was she was so stressed and intent on holding it in the wand in the right place over the baby, over the belly, and she had to hold it for so long that it made her right hand ache. And
carpal tunnel syndrome.
Yeah, she came.
Yeah, it's actually that is true. It's not carpal tunnel though. Amy went to school to be a sonograph technician or whatever, and she was constantly complaining about the pain because of the way they have to hold.
It's like gamer's thumb
at a certain angle and press really hard. Like your hand gets very sore, and so that's exactly what that lady was experiencing, was that pain.
Yeah,
it was also potentially the leaking out of evil into her hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Could be.
Through proximity.
Leaching out of her hand. But I think she came to that realization, and that's where she realized what she was doing and the whole practice was wrong. And
right, because
it's an amazing story.
That Sunday just happened to be the gospel was that exact.
Right, and she felt like it was coming straight to her. Like,
wow.
God was messaging her.
That was a good
and
one.
If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, and her right hand was in throbbing pain.
Yes.
Wow.
She felt like that was directed to her.
Yeah.
And so it gave me goosebumps when I heard that story, and because I never realized the detail of what was required to have an abortion. What's the recent movie? My family has went to see it, and they've told me to watch it, but it's
Unplanned.
Unplanned. They said it's an amazing movie. It really goes into that detail.
Pro-choice groups were buying out theaters to that,
just so people
couldn't see it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's quite a tactic, huh? Way to open an argument there.
Yeah, so if my money was going to pro-choice, I'd be I'd be a little upset that that's how they're spending the money.
They're giving the money to the pro
to the movie
life
theaters
people.
rather
Yeah.
than to making the whole
I,
process.
see, that's what I was
more-
saying. It's like it's a very emotionally driven thing.
Oh,
So
it
I mean,
is.
it isn't. I don't think they thought that deeply. I think they were just happy to be like, in your face, you can't
Yeah.
get in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because somebody at our church actually went to see the movie at a local theater. The movie they wanted to go to was sold out. So they were able to buy tickets to the next showing. They showed up, they were the only two people in the theater, but it was sold out. They actually managed
my
to get two
goodness.
of the tickets before they were sold out, but they saw the movie by themselves because all the other tickets were purchased.
So the donation money came into the, I don't know, I guess it'd be Planned Parenthood or one of those organizations. So the donation money came into that group, and
Yeah.
then they took that money and
Yeah.
bought tickets.
Unless people did it out of their pockets.
Why
Yeah.
would you do that? That's such a waste of money.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, even if you were spending your own money, like you could.
Yeah, and it's, I mean,
they're actually adding to
silence the message.
they're actually adding to the whole mystique of the movie
know?
by doing that. But people are like, wow, they're
Yeah.
spending it to avoid.
Well,
I mean, that's
how-
actually going to get more people to want to go see it.
How do
They're
you-
like?
How is that an effective form of argument, though? Silencing the other message.
Yeah, no idea.
Have a discussion for crying out loud.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the ban from Alabama prohibits abortion in almost every circumstance and is considered the most restrictive abortion law in the country. The legislation makes exceptions only for the health of the mother and for fetuses with fatal anomalies that make them unlikely to survive outside the womb. Rape and incest are not exceptions to Alabama's ban.
I think the other argument for not making that process illegal is that people are still going to do it either way, and if it's not clinically done, then you're putting
That's
the
one of the arguments.
mother at risk.
Yeah.
So maybe that's another reason not to do that is people are going to do it anyway. So let's do it.
It says, can a healthcare provider who performs an abortion be punished? And it says, Alabama's bill explicitly states that women are exempt from criminal and civil liability. Instead, the law targets doctors who can be prosecuted for performing an abortion, a felony punishable by up to 99 years imprisonment.
Oh my goodness!
So,
Wow, yeah, that's pretty harsh, right?
well, I mean, if you really believe
Is it, though, if it's murder?
if it's murder,
Well,
right?
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I guess.
If you rip apart a toddler,
Mm-hmm. But to say something that is currently legal is now, punishable with 99 years, it's kind of like a prohibition sort of approach.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
It's a tough subject.
yeah.
I have met.
I'm glad. I like how we open up the show with fluff pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not our actual topic
Yeah.
for the day.
No.
No, it's not. I can tell you though, I have met a number of women that, for whatever reason, I've been in circles with them, and they've opened up. That have had abortions and how much pain they feel inside for that.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the women on the pro-choice side try to make justifications that it's okay. They make lighthearted on it because they're trying to. There's a lot of one. You wonder how many of them are doing that to just justify themselves with the pain that they've had through it. But I know a lot of women have a lot of struggle.
That's
through
something that this has triggered too on the celebrity side of things. Speaking of
Yeah.
Alyssa Milano, there have been
Yeah.
a string of female celebrities coming out and saying that I had an abortion.
Yeah,
In support of
yeah,
the anti-law people.
right.
And I don't know. In some ways, it's almost being presented as though it's a badge of honor.
Right.
Sarah Silverman, the comedian.
Yes.
She has a bit where she talks about how she wishes she had had an abortion,
Yeah.
so she could have wear that badge of honor.
It just shows how far people
Okay.
look at the world that we're living in.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You can embrace something like that.
Yeah, and of course, like I said, that you can make that argument if you have convinced yourself that it's not a life,
Mhm.
right? If it's just a clump of cells
Right.
that hasn't developed into life yet.
And that's what's odd. Which is ironic, but the more science that's getting behind it, which they were hoping to justify, that is actually doing the opposite, is showing how much more of a life it actually is, a baby is inside the body and how much life they're living in the womb. So it's actually going the opposite direction for them, or they're finding that a baby is a baby a lot earlier, right up to conception. So
Yeah.
it's hurting the cause there. But I think what you mentioned earlier is a very good question, and that I struggle with. And as much as I've been a fan of politics, as I've gone older, I've grown tired of it. But as a Christian, if we were in political office, or we had some influence on the laws of the country, what is our role in enforcing some of these things on the general population that don't believe in God, or don't believe in the same way? Is it our duty, if we are, legislators, is it our duty to push these types of laws in place? I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a good answer to that.
Yeah. And, anybody is just going to completely disregard our opinions because we're males. So,
Right.
White
anything we
males.
say-
White males.
Anything
White
we
males.
say is irrelevant.
Yeah.
And, as far as that still.
You're probably no stranger to women telling you to stay out of their uterus, are you?
Yeah, I am not.
Well, being married for a long time, that happens anyway, right?
So
That's pretty much a common thing across the board.
So actually, back on that Sarah Silverman thing, that's just, it's so silly to me. And I bet she probably said it in a stand-up act, I guess. And
I'm not sure.
the
Probably.
crowd was like, "Woo,
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
abortion," yeah, go abortion. Like that sort of thing is just so ridiculous. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The crowd cheering.
Yeah, and honestly, like as a young man, I was I'm just so grateful that I was never presented with that sort of co-decision
Yeah.
to have been made as a young
Dodged
man.
a lot of bullets.
And because I don't know what I would have done, honestly, and I think I'd like to think that God knew where I was then, that I wasn't presented with that, because I don't know, now I don't have to live my life knowing that I would have been a part of something like that, So I am very thankful for that. But now, as an older gentleman with some gray, I would not
Right.
approve of something like that,
Right.
But
I saw a scattershot Facebook argument. Just a string of just memes and things arguing against the law, the abortion law. It was just arguments that were all over the board. It was like just they were throwing out all of the pro-choice arguments, and one of them said, if it's legal to declare someone brain dead because they have no brain activity and remove them from life support, how does it make sense that it's not legal to remove a clump of cells that doesn't have brain activity yet? So they're comparing the two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the kind of argument that they'll make and say, yes, and people get all fired up about it. But it's such a completely invalid argument. You're comparing two completely different things there. And removing someone from life support is just letting the natural process of life take place. Going in and scraping out, is interfering. So on one end, you're removing your interference. On the other end, you're actively interfering. And just because there may not be any brain activity yet, one of the things that struck me in a physics class that I had was that talking about energy, potential energy is energy, right? So this object is at rest right now, but it is full of potential energy. So when it's set into motion, it releases that energy. So the potential for energy is energy. There's energy stored in a still object. So doesn't that apply to life as well? Isn't potential life?
Right.
Like if this clump of cells has the potential to develop into human life, for all intents and purposes, it is human life. unless something naturally interferes with that process.
Right. To take light on the comment on how, this was a fluff piece, there are some funny articles. If you go into the Babylon Bee,
Would that make us fluffers?
I guess.
What's a fluffer?
We'll talk about it after the show.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we can.
Oh wait, do I not want to? All right, never mind.
Wow, I can't even believe you
Pull
went
up,
there.
pull up Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, right. Republicans dropped support for war with Iran after learning unborn babies would be killed. A new poll showed that the Republican support for an attack on Iran drops to almost nothing when they're informed that unborn babies would inevitably be killed from our airstrikes. While Republicans generally support any war in the general direction of the Middle East, they've had a sudden change of heart when it comes to Iran. But here's where it gets... Republicans have considered a few ways around this problem. One proposal would have all pregnant Iranians evacuated so the U.S. military would be free to kill anyone else who gets in the way. Another idea is to equip U.S. drones with pregnancy-detecting missiles who could only kill
So this
another...
is Babylon Bee, or is this the
Yeah.
alien?
Yeah, it's a Babylon Bee. Could only kill other innocent life and not the unborn.
That reminds me of a thing I saw. What did Iran expect establishing their country so close to all of our military bases?
Pregnancy-detecting missiles.
Oh,
That's great.
very, very interesting.
Oh my gosh.
Just picturing a giant EPT
Yeah.
test being dropped from a plane. Is it one line or two? Is it one line
Yeah.
or two?
That could be a whole other subject. Like if you worked for a defense company and you're personally responsible of creating very constructive ways of mayhem
Yeah.
to destroy people, and you're a Christian, how does that play out? I mean, what do you have going in your head through that
Right.
whole challenge?
Yeah.
I mean, you have defensive weaponry that you could justify that you're trying to do it out of self-defense, but when you have the offensive capabilities, I was in Eglin Air Force Base, and I'm amazed by engineering feats. One of the ones that they had, and this was over 5-6 years ago, was the ability that a jet could launch a missile that had many projectiles that would come out of the missile over the battlefield. So we're talking about when there's actual combat occurring between two forces, like the U.S. versus whomever, that it would make decisions on the fly, where it could tell by the shape of the cars who were the good guys and who were the bad guys, and it would target on the fly which missiles would hit which cars. And this was like
You could do that with
5,
like
6
GPS
years ago.
chips in your troops.
Yeah,
equipment,
that's
right?
true. Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that they have is just
Mm-hmm.
crazy amazing. But also, I mean, how do you deal with doing that stuff and constructively being a Christian? I'm not judging these people because I think the technology is really cool. It's amazing, but I bet that is a struggle.
Just have to have the just war doctrine painted on the ceiling in your bedroom, so it's the first thing you see in the morning.
Exactly right.
Just war. It's a just war.
Yeah. All right, so I think we beat this thing to death.
Yeah.
Good choice of words.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, the thing is not the clump of cells. I'm not pro-choice. But I think switching segments, what I was really struck by, and I still, with my faith, I still have struggles, but found a show that was on Amazon Prime called Convinced, and the general theme of the show was it showed many intelligent people that had different walks of life. Most of them were either coming from a pagan way of life, or they were atheists, or they were evangelicals, and how they found their way and why they chose Catholicism, and the pain they went through on that journey with their families almost disowning them. A lot of these people, and the interesting theme with most of the people were they weren't brought up in a Christian home. Their parents, the way their parents would frame things were, you need to think intelligently, and so don't just trust what people tell you, come up with scientific reasons for why things work. So only validate things based off of your ability to investigate it and follow through. And so, there's that hidden way of scientism, which is called where nothing that you can't prove isn't necessarily true, right? So, but a lot of these folks were people that we know about now, and we know some of the old ones, like C.S. Lewis. We knew he was pretty big atheist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer Fulwiler, which is a common person, she has her own radio show as well. She was a big time atheist as well, and she converted to Catholicism. She went running to it eventually. But what the talk was and the general theme was of the show was to sell to intelligent people that Catholicism is an intelligent choice.
Yeah, Lewis says when you come down to it, atheism reveals itself to be a boy's philosophy.
Right. And it was really a theme. They were reaching out to intelligent people to say, hey, you're not dumbing yourself down by becoming Catholic. In fact, you're finding if you pursue your intelligence path, you're going to run into it. If you really follow in your heart trying to find the meaning of life, it's going to hit you.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just an amazing story from that movie, especially since I'm not intelligent, but I was able to understand the words that were thrown together for these intelligent people.
And the show was on Amazon Prime. I'm convinced.
Yeah.
Like they interviewed probably, I'd say, a dozen different people, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The one guy really stood out to me though, where he was, so the people would, the interviewer would, kind of lead to how they came to where they are, and the one dude said, "Yeah, so I was raised in a Catholic home. We went to mass every Sunday. We prayed before meals. I went to a Catholic school, but." Well, we really never talked about Christ. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, man, you went to Catholic school, you went to Mass every Sunday, you prayed before. Like, what more do you need? And he was like almost playing the victim card, like, I didn't know anything about Christ. Well, yeah. So his parents are probably like, yeah, I'm going to sit you down, as a teenager and talk about, the three persons in one. Like, what more did his parents have to do?
I think a lot of kids, they feel like their parents they're being thrust into a way of life that they don't really understand, and they divorce themselves from what's being told to them, and they don't really tie the connection to this is their life and that this should be important to them. Like, for some reason, kids just turn that stuff off. A lot of them do. Where they could go to Catholic Mass and they could go to a Catholic school and they do whatever they have to do with their prayers, but they're really not living it. They're not. I think they're doing it as just it's a requirement.
Well, they come by it honestly. I think most parents don't have the understanding either. Most people. In
lot of Catholic parents don't have that understanding.
Catholic school has a religion class.
Sure.
Yeah. So
sure, but it's
about
school.
All that.
It's school. I don't know.
So you're saying that makes it.
They're just not.
Yeah.
Well, think about
absorbing it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at kids, I mean, even like my son when he talks about biology or in his chemistry class, he'll be like, when am I ever going to use this? They more focus on the grade and getting done with it and moving on and not really internalizing it and saying, why is this important to me? Mm-hmm. I would think that a lot of them are probably from that point of view. That's what happens to them. Mm-hmm. They don't really identify, they're not digesting it for bettering themselves. They're just trying to get past it.
Sure, and if you're not living it at home,
right.
if you're not living it out, it just sounds like a history class, something that doesn't really apply to you.
Yeah, but I'd say
sounds like superstition,
mass,
right?
Yeah.
Going to Mass every Sunday, praying before meals, that's living it.
Yeah. I mean, at the minimum level, yeah.
But it's living it because my parents, that's what they always did, versus we're doing it because
they're probably paying less attention at Mass than they are at school.
Yeah.
I'm going to get through this hour to get to my day.
No, I get it. Like, I know how hard teenagers struggle with going to Mass, and but it's just funny that was his whole argument for my parents never really talked
Nobody ever
about
told me.
Exactly.
What really struck me from that, and I felt a personal experience in my conversion, and it's something that I've worked with through my parents. My parents God love them, I thought I was going to be kind of, they would never make me an outsider. They love me unconditionally. I could be a murderer and they're going to still they'll come up with a good reason why I had to murder that person, right? You're a good person at heart, Rob. I know there was probably no other choice for you to murder that woman that was just sitting there with her peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You had to have that sandwich. I understand where
They
you
were
were.
chewing with their mouth
They were
open.
chewing with
I
their mouth open.
understand.
He had a peanut
Yeah,
allergy.
yeah.
So
My parents loved me unconditionally, no matter what. But I did have this strong tug and feeling that I was going to greatly disappoint them when I became Catholic because they're very, very Baptist, and they're taught. They're not actively taught anti-Catholic stuff, but there's these tones and these things that are implied during their messages that make it like it's wrong.
Yeah, I was never taught anti-Catholicism, but I picked it up from cues that my parents were anti-Catholic, and
But what
so
I
was I.
found, and I completely agree with it, and my parents have picked up on it, Protestants and evangelicals, when they're broached to the subject of what they think of Catholics, they speak non-truths. The leaders of those churches speak non-truths about why Catholics follow through with Mary, why they recognize Mary, why they pray to saints, why they have symbols in their church. They say, well, I don't want to call them out as being deviant purposely to say they're lying on purpose to sell their cause.
no, of course not.
But there's people that are at the pulpit that are either getting that information passed second, third hand, where they're providing their point of view about what Catholics do and what they are, that we worship Mary, that we have idols that are all through the church of people, and we worship them.
Mm-hmm.
They share that information in the church with people, and people, why would they have to take the time to investigate Catholicism? It's a pretty deep subject. I mean, if you think about it, if you really believe what you're going to in a church, why do you want to, like, if somebody's telling you that, we're like, okay, fine, that's fine. If that's what the position is from Catholics, I mean, on what a Catholic is, there's no reason for them to want to pursue to find out if the person's really telling them the truth. But that's what a lot of these people shared is, when they were living the evangelical life, they come to the realization that when they go to church every week, they were slowly realizing they were only getting a point of view from the person preaching at the pulpit. It was their point of view of what they were preaching, what the Bible was saying to them, and not necessarily what God's belief was.
Sure,
And
Fulton Sheen
yeah,
said, what did
yeah.
he say? There are millions of people who hate what they believe the Catholic Church to be, but there
Yeah.
are not 100 people in the world who would hate it if they understood the truth about it. I don't remember the exact quote.
No, you're right. I mean, what I think was, and I felt the same way. People, they realized they'd have other friends. You'd have people that were Baptist. They had people that were Lutheran. All sorts of different Protestant walks of life. I mean, they work with these people, and even when they would have Christian group study, they came to the realization they all had a different point of view from their denomination on certain things, and they would argue lovingly as brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like, well, wait a minute. If we're all filled with the same Holy Spirit, why do we all have different points of view? And you start realizing how counterfeit these denominations are. They're like, well, God only has one truth. But yet there's 5 of us here that believe 5 different truths on the same thing. And I that's where I came to become Catholic, and that's how I came to realize it. What they said, and it was my exact journey, is, well, if there is one truth that God intended, then you have to get to the root of when Jesus started his church, and who started it, and who's closest to what Jesus started. And if you follow that, you realize that it's Catholicism, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't try to pound this in people's heads that, oh, Catholics are right and everybody else is wrong. It's just a self-realization. If you really want to get close to God and find the truth, and you really want to wonder if your pastor Bobby Jones, if he's just giving his message based off of the way he interpreted the Bible versus how God wants you to interpret the Bible, you come to the realization you should go as close to where God messaged to the apostles and what he shared with them and how to message it. And when you learn that, you find the Catholic Church was right at the beginning, right? And that's what people have a hard time digesting.
You got to listen to Scott Hahn's conversion story about that, because as a Presbyterian minister, he believed all of these falsehoods about what Catholicism was, and the more he looked at it and compared it to what the Bible said, he saw the connections, and he just couldn't avoid it. He was railroaded into Catholicism through truth. There's nothing he could do.
And I'll admit to it. I mean, there's certain things I haven't shared with you generally, but I've had a personal struggle for the past 6 weeks with my faith. And what's really jarred me was, what's going on in the church with the priest scandal and the bishop scandal. And the church's answer to that has really, I've struggled with it, and combined with that in my personal life, things that I've had happen here that I'm just frustrated and tired of, that I've tied all together. It's weighed really heavy on me.
It's weighed really heavy on all Catholics, I would say.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like the Catholicism has the lock on us because there's nowhere else to go. So if I'm
you sound
Lutheran,
like Saint Peter,
and I want to go to I disagree with some decision that the Lutheran Synod has made, I'll go to some Presbyterian church or something.
Right, or the Missouri Synod.
We don't have any other thing to go to as Catholics.
Right, because it's the truth, right? And
there's
the
no
priest is not necessarily the truth, and I think that's what I'm coming to the realization, even through my struggle being upset with the Catholic Church, is the church is about the teachings. It's not about the people.
Right. The church isn't the truth. The bishops aren't the truth.
Yes.
The decisions that the organization makes on how to deal with these, that none of that is your faith.
Yeah, the priests are not the church.
And the church moves very slowly.
Yeah.
And canon law is not it's not the same as, the legal law.
It's not called bullet law. It's called canon law.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Why do you have to say that?
It was stupid. Stupid!
Eat
the salsa.
Yeah, eat some salsa. But
and the difficulty there is that, we're also told the priest is acting in the person of Christ during the Mass, during the confession. And Catholicism has notoriously been bad at marketing itself and explaining itself.
Right.
And there are Angie and I were just talking about this the other day. The words that the church uses are everyday words that in everyday context mean other things. Right? Like the infallibility thing about the Pope. It doesn't mean he's infallible. It has to do with a specific thing, right?
Right.
And I can't remember what the other word was, but there's another word. There are a lot of them that people hear them and assign the general meaning to them, but the church doesn't mean that.
Right.
And it's almost like, how can we make ourselves more confusing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's arrogance too.
Yeah.
Like almost like, what, we really don't want you to understand these words that we're using.
Right.
But for people that are evangelicals or Protestants that listen to this show, I'm not trying to personally attack them, but you should do a self-analysis of where your beliefs are coming from. Do you believe that you're learning off of your own personal point of view from the Bible? Are you getting it from your pastor? Where do you think your pastor is getting their information, and why is their way the right way versus another denomination of the faith that has it a slightly different way? Why do you think that's okay? And some would argue, well, I know in my heart, I have Jesus in my heart, and my point of view is the fine way to go because I feel him inside me, in my heart, right?
Yeah.
So, but in the end, it is our job to pursue truth and to defend it. And are you able to defend your own personal point of view if you're not finding where the root and the intention of what God really meant by the messages he shared in the Bible? If you really believe it, you should do some self-recognition on a few things that blew me out of the water, which is one, who put the Bible together?
Right.
You should do investigation on that. You should find out when the Bible was put together, how the books were composed, who made the decision. to
Who
put
was the
books in,
first pope?
Who was the first pope and why that pope was selected,
Yeah.
right? You need to do some of that self-recognition because,
Sure.
I was very anti-Catholic. And I was those people that I watched on television. I got slammed in the face when I did my own recognition. I'm like, I have no other choice but to be Catholic.
Yeah.
Even when I didn't want to be Catholic, I had to go in that direction. If I knew I was a Christian, there was no other choice for me. They had all of the truth written. I mean, they're the ones, right? With all of their flaws in the people running it, they're the root of the church. And it might be hard for people to hear this, but it's just doing the investigative work. Don't be sublime and just sit out there and say, I'm just going to trust what... I mean, they're good people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with a church of good people. Why are you trying to challenge me to challenge what my church says? Well, do you want to know what the truth is? You should be pursuing it. You should care.
I don't practice Santeria. I ain't got no crystal ball. Oh, I'm sorry. I was being sublime. You said don't be sublime. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So, that's just a way and the point of view that I really enjoyed from that. And it was they weren't trying to shove it down your throat. It just showed a pathway of all of these people and how they walked. And it just like, and the funny part was I felt very much the way a lot of them did was they didn't want to be Catholic either.
Oh, no. I didn't want to be Catholic. Did you want to be Catholic?
Yeah, they saw it, and I fought it privately.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, there's no way this could be right. I mean, why am I feeling this way? But there was no other pathway for me to go because it was true.
I always say I didn't just not want to be Catholic.
Yeah.
I wanted to not be Catholic.
Right.
You know what? That's not entirely true. I wasn't being truthful, but I actually did want to be Catholic.
Mm.
So I had a Catholic friend in high school, and I went to mass with him a few times so that we could go out later and run around the streets or whatever.
Sure.
Because his mom never cared if you're going to Saturday night mass and then, but
Go slash tires. It's fine.
sure, yeah. I mean, no, but so I'd go to mass and I would see people going through the different rituals of mass, and I thought, they look really confident. They look like somebody I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that drew me in. This was years before becoming Catholic, but I always had that in my head.
Okay.
Of, these people coming in and really knowing what they were doing, rather than going to Lutheran service and just kind of being all waspy and not really getting into the service.
Is this the Sunday this month when we have communion?
Yes, I can't remember.
Yeah,
Because I don't like that one because that's really long.
but there's a lot of Catholics that are like that too, though. All the Catholics don't practice like you were admired, right?
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of waspy Catholics too, right?
People
that just feel
are
like
judgy. Come on, we
oh,
love
jeez,
all.
they all
No, but there's
are.
people. Tons of people at mass that just can't wait for the hour to be over.
Yes.
Sure.
No.
They're just doing it as a rite of passage because they've been taught to do that, but they don't really identify. They don't get the magic of what's really happening at Mass.
Mm-hmm.
They just feel like, oh, I have to do this. This is the rule God threw in front of me.
You know what's
they don't
remarkable?
really get to it.
Too, the realization of when the bread of life discourse hits home for you and the understanding of what the Eucharist is.
Mm-hmm.
Like right after Jesus feeds the 5,000, and he talks about, this is my body, eat my flesh. Father Mike Schmitz has a great video called The Hour That Will Change Your Life. It's him on stage somewhere talking about it. And he talks about that from the book of Matthew, the bread of life discourse, and how it describes what Catholics believe the Eucharist is and why. And it's like, holy cow, it's right there in writing. How do all Christians not have the same understanding?
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening at Mass.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah, and one last thing on that before we move on. One of the things that I thought about when watching that movie, what was it called? Convinced, yeah. Is all at one point someone was talking about all the different sects of Christianity, the different denominations. One of the things I thought of is Catholicism was first, and then over time broke out to have different, you know, Baptists and Presbyterians and Lutherans. So all these different branches broke out of Catholicism. And one of the things that I recall from one of the Father Mike videos, Father Mike Schmidt's, is one of the devil does four things, and one of those things is he scatters. So he scatters the flock and now we've got all these different denominations, and they're all in disagreement of the basic tenets of Christianity, not just looking at the Bible and reading the same passage. All four different denominations could read something differently.
Correct.
And so it's almost like the devil is at work in that.
Almost.
Oh.
No, he is at work.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. It's
Yeah.
not an almost.
Yeah.
Like.
It's sure literally a divide and conquer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do it, I mean, imagine if that whole church was still together, how many people strong, and how much good in the world would be if everybody was unified.
Well, I mean, look at Catholicism. Even Catholicism brought together different, what are the names of those different groups of Catholicism? You've got different Armenians and...
Oh, the different rites.
Yes.
The Maronite rite, we're the Roman rite.
Yes.
You've got the Orthodox. Yeah.
So even that, but they're still under one. They're still Catholics, and they still have one true belief. But yeah, so
even there's a splintering, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I think a lot of it in some of those. I mean, Catholics actually have their own denominations, right? I mean, there are some points of view that they all greatly differ over. Even the cardinals argue privately on positions of the church and how they should work through things. I mean, it's an ongoing challenge.
But there's still one direction.
Maybe, maybe with lesser issues. But
right.
I mean, the entire Roman Catholic Church believes in the Catechism.
Right.
And so, I mean, the core issues, the issues of dogma, are not in dispute.
Mm-hmm. Right. But there are internal challenges on how to welcome divorced people into the fold, whether they should be able to take communion, how should homosexuality be handled in the church.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that have different points of view on that get challenged as well. But, I mean, it is, we're all humans and none of us are perfect. But that's what's amazing. I mean, having the size of the church, why people may think the Catholic Church moves slowly, they hold tight to from the original points of view what the Catechism does say, and they don't want to make those changes because they believe, well, these things have been figured out thousands of years ago by very smart people. It's almost like the same argument, even though I think that the Catholic one is much stronger than the Constitution of the United States. The founders of the United States, we believe, built a brilliant solution for how our country was composed and how we follow law. People don't believe we should change the Constitution, right? Because there's a lot of smart people that pulled that together, and it's amazingly built a very resilient country that we have. It's almost the same thing with, how the Catechism has been pulled together to explain things. I mean, reading the Catechism, you can get almost any answer to any question through that. I mean, the amount of detail that's in there, and they're all tied biblically. I mean, almost everything is tied to a Bible verse. So, I mean, where else can you get that kind of leadership or to pursue knowledge to pursue? Like, it's already been thought through. I mean, it's all written down.
I think when we're talking about all these differences between Christians, though, if you want to get to the heart of it, and you kind of get back to like baseline, you just look at what Christ said when the Pharisees asked him, "Which is the greatest commandment?" Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
There you go. I mean, that's the crux, right? Everything else, is different levels of detail.
Right.
But Jesus himself came out, God himself came out and said, the most important thing for you to do is to love me and to love each other.
Right.
Boom.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
It is, but that is, yeah.
You nailed it, dude.
I think, though,
I know.
Denominations will use that argument as to why they feel okay with having a separation. No. they'll use that same argument.
Really?
They're like, well, that's an in-house debate.
Yeah.
We do have differences on this other layer, but we all believe Jesus was the Christ and then he was reincarnate, and
Right.
So,
He was not reincarnated.
well, you know what I mean? Yeah,
Incarnate.
incarnate,
Right,
right?
right.
Yeah. So, but what I'm saying is
Yes.
they use that same language that we always believe
Okay.
in what Jesus says about the what's the most important commandment.
We have commonality there then.
Yeah, that's
Right.
true.
It is.
We are all joined there. I mean, I don't think anybody that I know of in the Catholic Church is saying that, Protestants aren't Christians.
No,
Baptists
they
aren't
don't.
Christians.
No,
And, not the argument that is often launched against the Catholic Church, that Catholics aren't Christians.
Yeah, very prevalent.
Yeah.
That's true. And that whole, worshipping of idols, and because of the statues. And, yeah.
Mhm.
So there were a couple things. There were a couple literature pieces that came out of that convinced. One of them was John Donne's "Batter My Heart" sonnet.
John Duns Scotus?
Yeah, that
Or the poet John
I'm-
Donne?
I don't know. Maybe it's John Donne.
D-O-N-N-E or D-U-N-S?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I think he's a
I know
poet.
the sonnet is "Batter My Heart," so it would be the poet.
John Donne. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've never heard of that. Have you guys read that?
Batter My Heart?
Yeah, that was one of the ones that.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, like beat, not not
Oh.
like put it in a bowl and batter it. But
Sorry.
Yeah. The other one was obviously C.S. Lewis, as a prior atheist, and specifically merely Christianity, which was.
Mere Christianity was huge for a lot of atheists. I mean, because he explained things in a way that people could pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And they identified with his point of view.
Yeah.
Because they've had similar trials in their life. That was a huge one for people. So,
Mere Christianity, that's the one that opened with him, in the throes of World War II, right?
It began as radio addresses during World War II, yeah.
And then.
It wasn't written as a book. It was delivered as a series of radio addresses to the people of England.
right.
Yeah, there was some.
And the funny thing is, he wasn't even Catholic.
No,
But
never
he
became
drove
Catholic.
people
Church of
to
England.
he drove people to the Catholic faith. I mean,
He did yeah.
I think Catholics. C.S. Lewis is probably a lot of people one of their biggest fans. I mean, one of their favorite people to follow.
Yeah.
He,
Which is ironic.
he understood purgatory
Yeah,
and
yeah,
agreed
no,
with
yeah,
the teaching of purgatory.
Right. Yeah.
Another one was Thomas Aquinas. I've not read any Thomas Aquinas. Have you guys?
I have not. That's somebody I have on my list of people to read because I hear there's a lot of people that get a lot from him.
Heavy theology there.
Yeah.
I read.
There's a podcast called Pints with Aquinas.
Mm-hmm. Have you listened to
It's
it?
a good one. Yeah.
I read.
There's Thomas Aquinas and beer involved.
Oh, nice. Thomas Mertens. I read him.
I love Thomas.
Yeah. Now that's really deep, but he's got a very cool story. Like he's pretty interesting. I didn't finish it.
Toward the end of his life, he came very close to sort of an Eastern philosophical understanding. He was like almost became Buddhist. So some of his writings are not necessarily pointed at as favorably, but I don't think there's that big of a disconnect between a Buddhist sensibility and a Christian sensibility. The faith details are very different, but I think there's honor in Buddhism.
Another one was Lee Strobel, The Case for Christ.
I've heard of it.
I read that book. It's very good. He was an atheist as well, and I think he was a reporter for the Chicago. Is it the Chicago Sun-Times or I think it was a big Chicago paper. But what was neat with his process was he wanted to actually dispute Christianity, and so he was going to do it from a reporter's point of view. It's like, how would you dispute a topic? You do it with investigative journalism. So he took that approach, but the more he pursued that information and finding truths behind it, the more it was having the opposite effect to him. So it was forcing him to become Christian. The more he investigated, and he was very anti-Christian. So that book, he explains what he was pursuing and how that opened his eyes. It's a good book. That's a good book for people that want to get on the off ramp and check things out. Like, if you dive right into a Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis, I wouldn't say it's completely deep, but it is, it's involved, and it's one of those things, at least from my point of view, you have to read it a few times to get, if you want to get immersed into his thinking and his point of view and his argument. It took me a few times to read it, but it's not that it's disinteresting. It's very good. It's just deep, deepish.
Lee Strobel? Or
Mere Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
But like Lee
I
Strobel.
had the audiobook, that one.
Yeah.
Huge difference. I could not read it. It just didn't get the language.
Mm-hmm.
But the audiobook was spot on.
It's a great way to digest it, is to do both.
Oh,
Yeah.
Listen to the audiobook and then read it, and then just go back and forth.
What if you did both at the same time, just to save time?
Okay.
It would be like...
Yeah, but that's a very good suggestion. But Lee
Not
Strobel,
while driving, though.
Yeah.
I tried to read Lee Strobel. I think I made it through the first 4 chapters. Tiny, tiny letters. Very thick book. Yeah.
It sounds like he had a
pictures.
similar journey to Lewis, though.
Lee Strobel.
Yeah.
I tell you the one that was my off ramp to C.S. Lewis, and I actually read C.S. Lewis after reading this guy. Very good, easy book. It was basically a C.S. Lewis fan digesting it, dumbing it down for you, and still being able to explain it real well, which was More Than a Carpenter by Josh McDowell.
Okay, yeah.
So Josh was a rampant atheist as well. I think he was actually a Hell's Angel.
Cool.
But the book is fantastic, and it's very fast to read. But he basically would talk about C.S. Lewis and digest a lot of those things he was explaining in layman's terms, right? So that's a great starter as well. I actually like that better than the Lee Strobel book.
What's it called?
More Than a Carpenter. It's very, very good. It's a great book. They actually suggest you to hand it out to non-believers that are questioning their belief.
The sequel, More Than a Plumber, was excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hear More Than an Electrician is coming out soon.
Yeah, I'm just looking back over if there was anything else from my notes of that. One of the things that one of them said that I caught was, as an atheist, there's no hope when things are not going well. So when things are fine in your life, being an atheist is, great, but I guess great.
Yeah, Scott Hahn is actually in the movie.
Which
and he's
movie?
interviewed at this Convinced.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of great thinkers that are in the same point of view. I mean, but he was in there a good bit.
Cool.
Yeah, so...
No, I just really liked its way of thinking, and it was just showing everybody's separate process and how they wound up where they were, and most of them were fighting it all the way to the end, explaining that, but how they succumbed to it because it made complete sense, and how much more joyful their heart has been after they made that decision, which is just a great way to, I think the format was very good. It looked very professional. I thought it was a great documentary, or whatever you want.
Yeah, it was very good. Yeah, I think you could tell it was done by, the Catholic Church, or it was a little, it felt a little bit like, with the music and it seemed, and the lighting, it was very, very well produced, but it seemed a little bit like it was written by the Catholic Church for Catholics, or hopeful Catholics, I guess.
It's unusual that something produced by the Catholic Church was well produced, though.
On Amazon Prime.
That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the Christophanic show is, too, on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, that's true. That's right.
Maybe there's somebody at Amazon who, is trying to smuggle in some Christianity.
Yeah. Weird, and I ran into it, not by looking for it, it just kind of shoved in your face. I'm like, whoa, this is like my general search, There's a lot of things like that on Amazon.
Well, maybe
Amazon Prime has a lot of other questions.
Amazon Prime.
Yeah. Buy it out so people can, confront it with the good news.
They have that other show.
I'm sure I bet you can find one out there. Yeah.
Sure, because people have written